Hello everyone, I hope you got another cup of coffee ready, because today is another power talk. Me and my great friend Andreas came together again for a second success nap, which is the fifth in the series. What are the success naps? Well, they're a series of talks between me and people that I'm very lucky to call friends. And we all had different paths in life. And we're trying to share what we believe at this point is the right thing for us to do. Maybe you can get some value out of it. So, why is today so special? We're gonna discuss mindfulness, we're gonna discuss being intentional, minimalism, book recommendation, and personal finance. I know, this is a really interesting one, and how to eventually achieve what you desire. So, without further ado, I just want to jump in the topics of the episode, because you already know Andreas. He's an amazing guy, he's such a brilliant mind, and last time when we talked about energy, I've got such a positive response from all of you guys, and I swear this is not an energy pun, because there had to be something negative as well, in order to make the pun work. Alright, let's go right into it. This week I want to focus more on the side of goal setting, and how we prioritize things, and how we manage to deal with such a high level of complexity. I've always wondered, because at some time during our uni we were studying together. Sometimes that worked, other times it didn't. I'm always thinking, because I remember you were learning the materials faster than me, and I believe we have some differences in the ways that we study and in the way that we memorize, because I remember you being able to memorize things really fast. Do you have any particular hacks, mind hacks, routines that are helping you? And maybe there can be morning routines, evening routines. Maybe you have some sort of ritual when you're learning, for example, turning off your phone or whatnot. If you do have any, I would love to know about that. So maybe I can implement them if I ever start a master's again.
Right. So I think here I'll just start with the last thing. So talking about rituals, it's really something I wanted to adopt over time, and I never actually managed to get a proper ritual that I repeat every day. For me, it's just very simple: wake up, have coffee, and just plan for the day, really, and then just get on with it. But generally, I found very important in this whole learning process the fact that I was getting enough sleep every time. So sleep is really important for keeping the brain functioning in its optimal parameters. So I was always trying not to fall asleep, later than 12. And generally, I was quite an early bird. So waking up maybe at 6, 7, the latest. But I was trying to get a good 7, 8 hours of sleep a night, which I know for some people might seem quite a lot. Because they think, I have so much work to do, I just can't. To jump really fast on that, actually I had the same reasoning why I wouldn't sleep. I was feeling like there weren't enough hours in the day to do what I wanted, but I realized that I wasn't maybe the most productive. I remember having times when I would get distracted by different actions that were maybe not necessary, and obviously you have to allow yourself some time for that as well. But you can't say that you're watching Netflix for 3 hours and then you're running out of time. Like, it doesn't matter. And also on the topic of sleeping, I believe it's so powerful to wake up at the same time. Like, it doesn't matter if you run a bit late, if you're sleeping, let's say, 6 hours and 30 minutes or 7 hours and 30 minutes, depending on the time when you go to bed. But if you wake up at, let's say, 8 sharp, you know that you wake up at the same time and your body somehow reacts way better. I think that was just the way that I'm constructed, and I feel like each person should try, it's trial and error, because you don't know until you try that. For me, 6 hours of sleep are way too less. 8 hours, it's a bit more. I mean, maybe it's too much. That's what I was trying to say. I know I said it in a weird way, but 7 hours for me, it's probably the best that I can get.
Coming back to your ideas, I think sleep is really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I was saying, many people just say that they don't have enough time to sleep and they need to focus on work more. What I found was that if you actually get enough sleep, you can work in a more efficient way. So you can spend less time, you can focus much better and spend less time doing the work. I'm generally an advocate of working smart, not hard. Because it takes much less time, probably the same kind of effort, although I would think I'm inclined to think that working smart takes less effort, and you just get a better feeling overall that you're being efficient, you're getting the work done, and all that. Now, in terms of memorizing things, I always found it much easier to memorize things that contained numbers. I didn't particularly liked memorizing poems or quotes from text, but I always liked memorizing equations, numbers, dates, and all that. So I could actually see this in my results from modules. I was typically getting quite low marks in materials, and materials really supposed memorizing a lot of descriptive notions about different alloys and so on. It was way too little maths for my taste. Whereas if I was looking at modules like fluid dynamics or heat transfer, they're full of mathematical equations, and that's why probably most people are scared of them. I actually enjoyed them a lot, and I found them really easy to master and to memorize those equations and to make the assumptions and so on. So I think that's considering that engineering is mainly based on equations, maths, and all that, that's why I found it much easier to do generally well in engineering subjects.
Right. I had the completely opposite experience because I'm coming from a point of view where I can remember very easy quotes and lyrics and all that kind of jazz. But I'm not having trouble understanding and remembering numbers as well. But I was having troubles remembering different formulas, right? That's for me, when the numbers get mixed with letters, that's the end. And each person has, I believe, an inclination to something, because, intelligence is really hard to pinpoint and measure and whatnot. Like, you still have something that you're better at, right? And for you, that was, formulas and the complex, like you were really good, I remember, at really complex ideas and ideas that you were able to simplify things in terms of how they work in the world. Like, for me, fluid dynamics, that was just kind of weird. Honestly, I don't want to go through that again in my life. But no, I'm just really serious. But I was thinking that we were at the level of complexity, and now with the PhD, the level of complexity might have gone up a notch for you. Are you dealing with things differently right now, or how are you handling them?
Right, so I can say there's a massive difference between an undergrad and a PhD, in the sense that in the undergrad you have plenty of modules spreading over a wide range of fields. So in terms of that, it's a very good breadth. But the thing that lacks in an undergrad is the depth in which you go. Now, in a PhD, the thing is a bit opposite. So there's not too much breadth. You have a single topic you're focusing on, but you go very much in depth into that. So in terms of that, I did like during the undergrad that I could just jump from one module to the other, because I had coursework that was just going in parallel. So whenever I was, for instance, bored of something, or I just wanted to focus on something else, I could just easily jump on another coursework from another module.
Right.
So in that way, I was keeping my head sane in a way. On the other hand, now is just thinking about the same things, same concepts every single day, and the brain just doesn't take weekends. You think about your PhD work every time.
Right.
And sometimes it can get a bit overwhelming, because you just want to focus on something else. You want to take a break or think about something else or read a book or something like that. And you can't really do it, because you just take the book and you remember, well, I could have done this there. I could have sized this in that way, and so on. And your mind just flies back to your PhD.
Right. The thing is that, yeah, I agree. It's a different level of complexity, but it's also the fact that you get to think so much in depth of a subject that it really helps. Because if you're thinking of something over a span of time, then it starts to make way more sense. Because, I remember doing this crazy research paper at some point, and I thought of it for like 2 months. And I swear to God, like I was the only person who was able to do it, but that was because I had so much time to think of it, not because I was smarter or anything, but I literally had 3 weeks to get stuck on a particular point, and it just hit me like I believe I was playing pool or whatever the shit I was doing in the pub. I forgot, in Stags, right? So I was in Stags playing pool, and it just hit me there like, oh, maybe I should do it. So what I'm trying to say is that because our mind is focused, like even though we switch to another activity, our mind still keeps thinking of where we got stuck. And that's how I believe breakthroughs are achieved, because you have to think of something more than 3 seconds in order to achieve a conclusion which is maybe different from the norm.
Yeah.
Because, the more effort you put in, well, the more important the result gets. That's at least what it should be the norm.
Yeah, this is entirely true. Yeah. And also really important when thinking like a lot of time at something is or when you actually come up with an idea, it's very important to write it down. Have something handy to just take a note, record you saying something, just scribble down something. It's, especially in such a complex project, it's essential.
I completely agree with that. And I've been talking with some of my other friends about this topic of, I don't want to say journaling, but it's a sort of a book in which you have all of your business ideas and all of the things that you learn from books and all of the things that basically you read in, let's say, things that you read about development, about psychology, about, I don't know, physics, about subjects that happen in the real world, right?
Yeah.
So not stories, anything but stories, even though stories have their own merit. And for example, if you think of some biblical stories, underlying all of that, there are some phenomena in the real world, but that's just another can of worms. In my, let's say, book, I would have a whole section which would be called the mind dump section. And what I would do, I'm literally, whenever I have the thoughts, and I'm doing this on a regular basis because I've got so many interests. So right now I have 485 entries in that book, and that book is basically a collection of all the terms that I've ever searched for in the last 6 or 7 months. Because if I'm thinking, you know what was interesting? the fall of Rome. Let me research that. So that's something that clearly interests me. And instead of going and instantly researching it, instead of, let's say, working, I'm noting it down and I'm going back at it and maybe finding some other things that interest me in the process, right? But it also stops me from procrastinating, which, I'm doing a lot of. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. Haven't thought about that. About just keeping record of everything you learn.
Yeah, basically, you don't have to put down the explanations or whatnot. It takes literally 2 seconds to just write it down and see that maybe you can come back to find if there is any value in that idea.
Yeah.
In this process of writing down things, do you also write some sort of to-do list, or do you have a goal setting that you're writing? How do you go around by planning your days, your months? Because we have pretty large workloads and life gets hectic, and it's not everything about work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have a certain structure in your life, or how do things flow?
Right. So if there's one thing I learned from keeping notes of everything and just planning for stuff, is that it never goes as planned. So
Right.
apparently it might seem like a useless thing to do, but for me it seems, or it gives me the sense of control over the actions I'm taking. Now, in terms of the PhD work, I always write down ideas, things to try, methods of doing different things, and I have an agenda full of this stuff. Separate to that, I have a notebook where I generally, besides writing notes and formulas and all that, I also draw stuff.
Okay.
It helps me visualize things better. And also it depends on what kind of thing I'm thinking of. But some notions I need to sketch them in a way to make me understand them better.
Right.
Now, in terms of planning stuff, I tend to plan my next day. So every day, at the end of the day, I write down some ideas I want to try the next day, or some things I want to do.
So in the end, not in the beginning, right?
At the end of the day, yeah.
Okay. And also, sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to briefly go back on a statement. I was thinking, it was about keeping things separate. You were saying that you have a book for technical stuff and a book for the rest.
Yeah.
Do you think that helps you get some clarity? Sorry.
Yeah, certainly it keeps things more decluttered, if I am to say that. So generally the agenda for the ideas and new concepts and that is like a cleaner version of a notebook. The notebook, I can write whatever I want in which direction I want. It's much messier generally. And also the notebook, I don't really keep whatever is in there. Because if I get to something that's worthy to be written down, I either write it down in my thesis document or in my ideas notebook. But that is just like the refill pads that you just take pages out of it. You write down stuff, you draw it, and then you throw it away. But
it makes sense.
Yeah, it's just a connection of the way you think and the way you express it, because when you write it down, when you draw it, it's like trying to express it to someone, even if it's to yourself. Yeah. And it really helps, or at least it helps myself fix down things. So if I'm not really sure about some notion, I tend to write it down, to draw it, to do something with it so that it's represented in a visual manner. So then I can sort of feed that back to the way I'm thinking. And it's perhaps a bit difficult to explain.
No, I totally understand. And it's also the fact that you can go back to your idea and see if that idea survives.
Yeah.
So, because if you are thinking of throwing away the first piece of information, you are either thinking, hey, I should note it down in my good book, let's say in my book which is orderly, or I'm just completely deleting it and I just disregard it, right?
Yeah.
So it also filters what's good from what's, let's say, average.
Yeah. And
Right.
in a PhD with so many ideas, it's very important to keep them separated, so you don't get, because then it's all about being efficient with your time. If you have to go back through some ideas that weren't really good, it just takes more time and you're not really efficient.
And you get overwhelmed.
Exactly.
So you are saying that you're doing your schedule at the end of the day. I'm doing it, I'm just doing it for hourly at the end of my week, and I'm also using some color coding and stuff. So I was just thinking, what's your process with that? Because I interrupted you, so if you could go back.
So the reason for which I'm doing it at the end of the day is that I'm still in a sort of a flow from that current day. So I know what stage I'm at, I know the ideas I'm currently working at, and I know what's more important to be developed in the next day. Whereas I found if I take a break and just disconnect from whatever I did during that day and come back the next day and try to write a schedule or some ideas to try, I feel disconnected from what I did in the previous day. It's difficult to create a flow here. So yeah, this is why I'm doing it at the end of the day. And I did try to have hourly schedules, but this didn't really work out, only because the tasks I'm doing here really take a lot of time and they're difficult to estimate. So for instance, in a day I want to simulate a certain kind of converter working with a model of my energy storage. This can theoretically be done in, say, 2-3 hours. I can have a look at some waveforms in there. But then I come up with new ideas. I try different parameters in there and so on. And it just...
Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah, it extends everything. And who knows, it might be something really worthy to do for my thesis.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to make a short parallel here, and that's where the difference lies. Sorry, it's the difference between the fact that I'm actually, because I'm working a 9 to 5, let's say, even though it's not a 9 to 5, but I have some sort of structure which is already in place due to my work. So when I say I'm doing it hourly, that's why I can do it on Sunday and not get mad, because if I would have to do it for the whole week, I'd probably go insane. But I'm having these large time chunks which are blocked already, because I know that, let's say, from 10 to 7, that's my job. So whatever I have to do during my job, it just goes in that category. I'm not going too deep in the subject, right?
Yeah.
I'm only allowing myself, because let's say from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., those are 3 hours in which I can be productive. And again, the weekends as well. The weekends I have to time them, because otherwise nobody else will, and I'm gonna watch Netflix or some other shit. But that's the thing. So I think, we're in slightly different situations, but that's why I can understand the fact that you cannot time your work on your PhD, but you can basically plan anything else around it. Like you can have like a large chunk which is like PhD, and then everything else.
In that sense, it would be healthy to do that. Although I find myself not doing it as much as I want to. It's just, this is maybe a perk that comes with doing a PhD, is that you're very flexible with your work. So generally, if you don't feel like working at some time, you can just shift that to a bit later, or that you just need to be very disciplined and actually make sure you do the work, not just procrastinate. But for instance, I don't know, you want to just go somewhere in the afternoon or that. You can do that and then work during the weekend and so on.
Yeah.
So this does work, especially when you have a PhD that's pretty much based on modeling, and it's not very experimental. When you're doing experimental stuff, you need to be in the lab quite a lot of time. Whereas with modeling, you can work pretty much anywhere. It's more like theoretical. So that's one thing.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to know this before starting your PhD. Like, it's pretty tough to understand how much modeling against how much time in the lab you actually have to spend.
Yeah.
Which, if you think of it, it's quite funny because it's a completely different experience. But again, this experience can be tailored from person to person.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to hear that your experience is, I mean, you sound like you pretty have much everything in control.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. But now, if I'm looking back at my PhD, I would certainly choose something that has a more intensive, or has at least some experimental side of it.
Right.
It's only because in an experiment, you're pretty much following quite a clear methodology. Even if it's novel or if it's taken from a research paper, you can take that methodology, apply it, or just change a few things, and then you have those results. You can analyze those. It's much more straightforward in a way. Even though I'm probably describing the ideal experimental setup where everything works as it should. But then again, if it doesn't work, you can bring some explanations. You can think of that. In modeling, I would say it's more abstract. So in modeling, you're just sort of imagining how the real thing would be and trying to assign the mathematical and the physical properties to it, and trying to simulate how it would work in the real life. In my project, for instance, I would have really liked to have an experimental rig to work on, but given the very expensive material that is required in superconductors, this wasn't really possible. So I'm just doing modeling at the moment.
So yes, I can totally understand the value of experiments, and I would actually have to argue that they are needed in the education system. But there also has to be, as you're saying, a really strong methodology, because there can be two incredibly similar experiments that you believe they're identical, which they are eventually not. And I actually had this situation, like we were trying to replicate something, and because you have literally different sets of data, even though they're supposed to be looking at the same phenomena, well, you couldn't draw the same conclusions as in the original experiment. So it's really interesting, and you learn this by doing more experiments, I believe. But there is also you have to take your results with a pinch of salt. Like, I know that when I was doing the experiments, I was getting some really good results and I was happy, but I didn't realize that I was forgetting something in my experiment. So that's something really useful to keep in mind.
That's totally true.
Yeah, yeah. It's an experience that anybody should have. That's just, I believe that's a really strong point during your education, to actually be able to touch and see the things that you're studying. But I was thinking that, not necessarily from an education point of view, because I was just starting to only touch on this subject, but education is not necessarily only what we learn in uni. So if you were to recommend a book or something that you would say it's a must read for anybody who wants to develop themselves on different dimensions, like let's say maybe, I don't know, as a person or in business or in even their knowledge in science. What would you recommend?
Right, so my to-go book would be Modern Engineering Mathematics by Glyn Johns. It's the 4th edition.
The book of my childhood.
No, I'm just joking. This was just the to-go book for engineers. And it could have worked to just improve your life and make things easier during your first year undergrad, but that's pretty much it.
Actually,
It was a good book. Haven't opened it since then. But yeah, just talking about actually useful stuff in life. I would say the first one would be the book entitled How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Even though, I'm not... I can't really read as much as I want to. And by read, I mean non-scientific books or journals.
Right.
But this was one of the few self-help books I went through, and it's a really interesting read, this one. Another one which is really simple to read, and it's just like an evening lecture. It's called Lagom by Linnea Dune. And this describes a really interesting concept in life about keeping things in balance.
Nice.
And I believe it's a Nordic term, either Danish or Swedish. I think it's Swedish, huh? And this is really around the idea that in your life you need to have not too little and not too much. So if you think you have too much, try to give to others. If you have too little, try to work harder and get whatever you need.
Yeah, it's about equilibrium.
Exactly, yeah. And perhaps a more difficult book to understand. It's not like an evening lecture. You actually need to focus on what you're reading. This is called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It's written in a style similar to an academic journal, so a bit fairly. Yeah, it's fairly difficult to comprehend, and you need to actually take it very slow and read every paragraph and try to understand it. But it's really interesting. It gives an insight on the way we're thinking and we're approaching things.
Yeah, well, he's an academic at heart, right? So he's a professor.
Well, exactly. I should have expected that.
Yeah, he's actually one of... I enjoy that book as well. And he's one of the people that I tend to agree with. And it's interesting that he comes to some conclusions trying to explain. And lots of books, started to do this lately. They're trying to explain different phenomena by, let's say, our history and how we used to behave. Yeah. And they're just not rushing to conclusions. Yeah. But it's basically, this book is about our two modes of thinking. Mm-hmm. Like the one would be the two main systems. The one would be the fast system and the slow system, and how basically you can better control them, even though, like, if you're like, there is this funny thing which I absolutely love. If you go to a zoo and if you try to go to the pit of snakes and try to tap on the glass. All right, so no matter how many times you would be sitting in front of that glass and tapping, you can do this for the whole afternoon, and you are gonna eventually get kicked by the zoo staff, but you are still going to have to experience this jump back each time when a snake tries to bite you, because that's just natural reaction. So the best that we can do with those systems is to not necessarily control them, but to understand when the slow system kicks in, and to understand that when we're basically fast thinking, we're just in a reactive state, right? So we're not necessarily taking the best actions because, again, a snake behind the glass cannot harm us.
That's true. Yeah, that was very interesting about that book. Now, if I'm going a bit further,
sure.
Not necessarily with books that help in personal growth, but I think they're very important for, at least for the future of humanity, and for just growing in a way that you're aware of what's going to happen next. And there are two categories here. First of all, I would say Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. This is a really interesting book on artificial intelligence. I know it's a buzzing word now.
A bit, yeah.
Yeah. And everyone tends to focus on, look how great life will be with artificial intelligence, what fantastic benefits we can get from that. But what they're not thinking of is the potential dangers that can be behind artificial intelligence. And this guy, he's a professor at MIT. He's giving a really insightful thinking of what are the potential dangers and how we can prevent them. And more specifically here, why it's very important to focus on research on the security and safety of artificial intelligence. At the moment, we're still working on trying to understand how to implement it practically, but we need to have some very strict rules behind how we do this, how we implement AI.
It's not about what AI can do on itself, but it's what AI can do with the help of a human who's really bad intentioned. The worst thing. There is also a really good, and that's what I wanted to just say, there is a really good video on this team called Genocide Bingo, which is really funny, and it basically tells you all the ways in which AI can go wrong. But yes, please go on with the list. Yeah.
Right. Following on, not on the topic of AI, but on perhaps a more important topic here is Unshakable by Tony Robbins. It's probably becoming a classic now. But it's essentially a very nice way of telling people the basics of how to manage their money in a smart way. Yeah. And I think this is really important nowadays. We're getting jobs, we're getting paid, and so on, but not many people are. Yeah, not many people are aware of where going and how to better manage it. And I think this book gives a nice insight into that. And finally, for whoever is into investing, you might have already heard about this book. It's called Intelligent Investor by Ben Graham.
Right.
It's a chunky book. It's almost 600-700 pages. But it's very well written. And even if it's written in, I think, 1930s or 20s,
around that time, right? Yes.
So it's around almost 100 years ago. It's really telling universally available or universally applied things, which are still valid now.
Right.
I think that's pretty much what I would say in terms of books.
It's actually, The Intelligent Investor is a good book as well. Yeah, Unshakable as well. Money Master the Game from Tony Robbins, again, is a pretty good book for starters, as well as anything from Robert Kiyosaki. Those are not financial books. I would say those are more like self-help books that make you interested in this side, right? But with regards to The Intelligent Investor, the whole idea is that even though if you're trying right now to trade or to value things as Ben Graham would do 100 years ago, obviously it's not the same environment anymore. But there are some really good principles in that book, and if you can go past the fact that it's a pretty difficult read. Thinking Fast and Slow was difficult as well in terms of reading, but this one, The Intelligent Investor, was, for me at least, it felt like it would never end, right? So
Yeah,
even
I
if
can
you
totally.
even if you know the subject, I think it's over 1,000 pages, or at least it was in the edition that I had, because
Yeah.
I had the PDF one. So probably if you have the printout, it's 600 or 800 pages. I don't know,
Yeah.
but still, it's a pretty massive book. So it requires some time investment. But yes, I agree. All of them are really good books, and I really like this one on finding the equilibrium. I didn't read that one, so I'm gonna search for it as well.
Yep.
I was thinking that maybe if you would like to share with us, if you have a piece of advice that you're offered, or a piece of advice that you'd like to give to any person that will ever listen to this, what would that be? It can be any sort of advice. It doesn't matter. Anything that you believe has helped you in such an important way, right?
So I would really the kind of advice I would give would be around decluttering. It seems that for a few years now we're just in a rat race, trying to accumulate more, get more money, more objects, flashier cars, houses, and so on. But we're not really appreciating life as it should be. We're just in this race of getting more things without living life properly. So what I would really say is just try to focus on your life, try to enjoy it, build connections with people, help other people. So one of the most impactful pieces of advice I've ever heard was, or it wasn't really a piece of advice, it was more like a statement saying that your success is measured by the number of people you helped. And I really try to go by this statement in general. And now regarding decluttering, for many years I really enjoyed buying stuff, even if I didn't like it. Or not like Amazon. Long live Amazon. I was just buying random stuff I didn't really need. So the point here is that you would have a much simpler life by just focusing on things you need, getting good quality stuff, and just enjoying it for a long time, while also having, your house would be much cleaner, much easier to maintain, and so on.
Less is more.
Yeah, less is more. And finally, I would like to touch on the idea that, the popular saying that money doesn't buy happiness. I don't believe in that. I think money does offer you a gateway to happiness in a way that it provides security. So you don't have to worry about not having stuff to eat or not having a roof over your head.
Definitely.
But it's only applied to up to a certain level. After that level, what's more important is the relationships you have, your happiness in general. And I saw a really interesting video about that, actually made by Casey Neistat. It's called Being Rich versus Being Poor, a video essay. And he's actually talking about this idea of money buying or not buying happiness. In a direct way, you can't really just go and buy happiness, but you just have security if you have enough money. Also on this topic,
otherwise you'd be in a place of lack, right? So
exactly.
I mean, and up to a certain point, that's where I want to link some things. So after a certain point, obviously you're trying to get back as much as possible, because we both of us, I think we're smart people. but I'm looking at people who are even smarter than me, for example, and the person who's smarter than me, it's definitely, I would say, Bill Gates. Bill Gates, I think anybody can argue it's smarter than me.
Absolutely.
And he's donating something like 80% of his... I think actually there is that pledge that people have to donate 99% of their whole of their whole wealth during their lifetime. And Bill and Melinda Gates, and I'm not saying this just because I like Bill Gates or whatever or whatnot, because lots and lots of other people did this as well. And again, this was just to highlight your point that giving and helping people, I believe it's the most important thing, but you cannot help. I believe that you cannot help if you don't have what to eat. Like when you're in a place of scarcity and you need money to survive, like you need those $5, it's way harder to give $1 than, but you have to start. You have to start even if you don't have that much money, right?
Exactly. And if you remember in planes, whenever they give you the safety briefing at the beginning, they tell you in case the cabin gets depressurized, you get the oxygen masks. You need to fit the oxygen mask to yourself first before helping others, which is a normal thing to do. Is just take care of yourself. If you're fine, then just look at the others and try helping them. And this is something which can be quantified, maybe. If you're looking at the financial steps to freedom, I think that's how they're called. I think it's 9 of them in total. The last one being the one in which you have much more than what you need. But there's a certain point where you can live this kind of lagom life. I'm referring back to that book I recommended. So it's a balanced life with everything you need, but not more than that. And this point, I think it's the point where you can start looking at helping people financially wise, if I were to say that. Another thing I wanted to recommend just before I finish with that, it's a YouTube channel. The guy is called Matt Davella. It's the apostrophe Avella.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, he's doing really nice videos on minimalism and decluttering, and he was really inspiring to me.
He's more on a cinematic side, right? And the same as with Casey. They have good ideas, and actually it's pretty cool to see people with skills that are doing this sort of ideas, because I remember at some point there were different channels that they had pretty nice rhetoric, but they didn't have a person who was filming interesting things, right? So they couldn't grab a larger audience. So Matt Davella is actually, I believe, is one of the fastest growing channels in this niche of, like, from minimalists. That's probably the number one channel right now. And I can understand why, and he's trying his best, and that's the thing that I wanted to add. Maybe you can help like that as well. Like, maybe you don't have, not all of the ways of helping, they're not all of them financial. So if right now you're not making enough money, maybe you can volunteer your time, or maybe you can help around the house, or maybe you can, it can be even within your family, right? It can be anywhere. It's just this idea of trying to help people outside yourself.
Exactly. It can be with a good thought. It can be with listening to them whenever they need it. It's just like being a good person overall.
Pretty hard to achieve.
Yeah. But we're trying, at least.
Yeah, you should always aim for that, because if you don't aim for it, what else can you aim for, right?
Yeah, that's really the end goal.
I think that's a good idea to end with. I think we should all aim to become good people, in the sense that it it's not the amount of good that you're doing for yourself, it's the amount of good that you can do for the community and for your family, and basically for all the people that you've ever met and touched in a metaphorical way.
Yeah.
that sounded inappropriately, but anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today with me, Andy. This was insanely fun, and we didn't realize when the time just flew by, because there are so many topics that we enjoy discussing. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much as well. It was really a pleasure to talk about all these stuff. And just it's nice to know someone shares kind of the same values and ideas. It's nice to discuss about all of these. So thank you for that. And I hope I'll be back again on another topic.
I'm really happy to hear that. And again, I'm hoping that the way that we're doing this, I'm hoping it's useful for at least one more person aside from us, right? Because if at least one person gets something useful, like even one nugget of wisdom, let's say they needed a book on personal finance. If they got the book from what you are saying, Jesus, that's mission accomplished, right?
Exactly.
So that's the end goal.
That's right.
Right. So thank you again so much for that. And thank you everybody for listening. And we're going to catch up again soon.
I'm gonna start it slow because I don't wanna jump scare you. Each time when I'm recording these intros and outros, I'm so pumped up because I know what I edited and I know how good the episode actually is. I believe it was really insightful. And I will also provide you with a one-page PDF. As always, please find it in the description. I'm so thankful that you're here. I cannot take this for granted. I really appreciate it. And I know you might find it weird that I'm saying this, but for me, for us, 50 people watching this, it's massive, right? Because if we're helping even one person, then my mission is complete. Like, I don't care about anything else. Those are videos which are not monetized. I don't take anything out of it, and the people that are talking with me, they again don't get anything out of it. And actually, it's so nice of them that they're taking some of their time for something which is not even their passion, right? They're just helping me with this passion project. So again, I'm so thankful for you, and I'm also so thankful for them. I'm just really grateful to have wonderful people around me that are open to discussion and open to ideas. So if you're so inclined, like, share, subscribe, comment, and do everything that the YouTube algorithm wants you to do, because you're helping us grow, and you're helping this channel, and you're helping me get more guests actually. So if you also have a question, feel free to shoot it at bravenewidentity@gmail.com, which is the email address that I'm replying to. I've had 2 mails already, and they were private, they were personal, and people told me not to not to discuss them publicly, right? But I was so happy that people are asking for my point of view, because I'm not calling it advice. I'm not your guru, and I'm not a psychologist. I'm not that. But I know what worked for me, and I know I've been really passionate about human psychology, how our brain functions, and minimalism, and stoicism, and philosophy, and history, and I kept reading things. That's what's my passion, really, honestly. So if I can help with an advice, and if I do have the time to do so, because you have to also keep in mind that I'm working full time. I also have a side hustle, so this is my 3rd gig that I'm doing, right? So also please be really mindful about that. And other than that, so because it's gonna take a while until I respond, like it takes 2 weeks, honestly. But other than that, please feel free to email me. I'm gonna be more than happy to assist with any sort of questions. And that aside, I believe this was a wonderful episode. I'm so happy that I did it. Again, thank you so much for being here, and we're gonna meet again next week. Goodbye.